Okay, so we are officially starting now the second class for Morphosyntax in English. We have discussed last class very basic concepts and notions on morphology. Yeah, I told you we split this course into two parts, one being for morphology, the second one for syntax. And I told you that morphology has its own objects of study and its own minimal units of study. Now, let me just mute my cell phone, which I forgot. Sorry about that. So, when we talk about morphology, the first thing we have to remember is why this area of linguistics is named the way it is. Morphology. Logic, it studies something. What does it study? The morphs. Now, in Greek, what is the meaning of morph?
Something related to shapes.
Shapes, forms. That's it. Let me just put the volume down here. The shapes, the forms. The forms of what? The forms of words, okay? Now, the pieces of words that morphology deals with are called morphemes, okay? So the first thing we tried to make a difference last class was the difference between morphemes and syllables. When we are educated, formally instructed in language, we learn about how to split words into syllables. Now, morphemes are not syllables, okay? Morphemes are significant parts of words. Morphemes have a meaning. I do not mean that morphemes have a meaning like those meanings that you can find looking up the dictionary. Some morphemes uh, you can you can find them in the dictionary, not all of them. But when I say morphemes have a meaning, I mean that they are able to slightly change meaning of the words, the meaning of the words. For example, if I say calm, you all understand what this word means, okay? Calm is an adjective, okay? He is calm. Now, when I say calmly, I slightly change the adjective into an adverb. He spoke calmly, with calm, with uh, in a relaxed way, in a calm way. So this final suffix, the suffix li, slightly changes the meaning of the word and the grammatical category of the word. Sometimes there will be a change in the grammatical category. Sometimes there will be the idea of antonymy. So, for example, stressed versus unstressed. So, meaning the negative idea of what follows after it. Okay. So, a morpheme is not a syllable. A morpheme is a meaningful unit to morphology. Okay. So, the minimal object of study in morphology is the morpheme. Then let me go back to the slides I presented last class for you. Just a moment. So that's it. The science uh, that studies word forms, okay, and the internal structures that govern these processes of word forming. Words are not formed randomly, but there are rules that should be followed. Morphology deals with these rules. Now, the morpheme is the minimal unit, okay? If you take, for example, in unlikely and undeveloped, un plays the role of producing a negative effect, okay? Li in likely, okay, will produce an effect of changing the word class, in this case of likely from a verb into an adverb. The final ed sometimes will work as a past participle suffix. Sometimes it will work as a simple past suffix, okay? So morphemes are not words, but they are meaningful. Okay, we define it as the minimal unit of meaning to morphology. Okay, why? Because when I say the minimal unit of meaning, the minimal unit of meaning to semantics is the word. The minimal unit of meaning to discourse analysis is the utterance. Uh, the minimal unit of meaning to syntax is the clause. Okay, so depending on what area of linguistics you are relying on, you are working with, you will have different minimal units. The minimal unit of meaning to morphology is the morpheme, which is not a word, although some words are that they only have one morpheme, like ball, like dish, like fish, or for example, um, bar. Okay, they are coincidentally a word and a morpheme. But I showed you last class some cases in which we have words with one morpheme, two morphemes, three, four, and so on. There is no limit for that. Although words start getting too much complicated when we put many morphemes. But take a look at this. Anti-disestablishmentarianism. This is a word with more than four morphemes. One, two, three, four, five, six, seven morphemes. Okay, so morphemes basically they are either a root of a word, and when I say it's a root, it's the main morpheme of the word, and along with this root, to the left or to the right, we can position a prefix or a suffix. Okay, so morphemes are the significant units of a word. And then we get to the point that we are supposed to discuss today, which is the idea of allomorphs. Okay, so a morpheme can have different phonetic forms in different environments. And a unit of meaning can vary in sound without changing its meaning. Last class, I have touched this point. Okay. I showed you the example of the plural roots. And please bear with me with the phonetical transcription because I do not have the IPA fonts installed here, but I try to reproduce the phonetic transcription of the final S, the pronunciation of the final S for plural. Roots with a S, bees with a Z, yeah, and coaches with the schwa, coaches. So graphically, it's just a final S. Morphologically, this final S is called plural morpheme. Okay, so we have the plural morpheme here with a final S pronounced as a S. In bees, a final S pronounced as a Z. And in coaches, a final ES. So we have orthographic differences pronounced as us. Although we have two different spellings, final S and final ES, and although we have three different pronunciations, phonetic realizations, we have only one morpheme. What morpheme is it? The plural morpheme. Okay? So in this case, we call these three different manifestations of the plural as allomorphs. Now, what do we mean by allomorphs? Allo means similar, analogy, something that is not the same but plays the same role. Morph, form. So it's a form that plays the same role in the process of word formation. Is that clear? Can you see that you have here only one morpheme, although we have three different phonemes, okay? Go back to the idea of phoneme, the minimal unit of study for phonetics. Okay. Now, the morpheme is the minimal unit of study for morphology. We have three phonemes, s, z, and us, but we have only one morpheme called plural morpheme. Is that clear for you?
Yes.
Okay, so let's move ahead. Now let's take a look at another prefix, which is in. Okay, as in, as I said, indispensable or in. No, impossible is another allomorph. Uh, Indiscrete. Okay, now look at uncapable. When I say discrete, when I put the in before, what is the effect I produce? John is really indiscreet. He is not discreet. You see? Now, I'm incapable of walking 10 miles. It means I am not capable. So if you take the case of indiscreet and incapable, the prefix in and the prefix on, do you think they have the same or different roles? Do they have the same or different function in these words?
They have the same.
The same function of producing a negative effect. So in this case, in and on are allomorphs. They are the same morpheme. They are the not morpheme, okay? They are the morpheme that produces the idea of antonymy, okay? But according to the context, the graphic context, they happen to be either in or on or ill, as in illogical, or im with an m, as in improbable, impossible, uh, or ir, as in irrelevant, irreverent, and so on. So these 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 different phonetic and graphic realizations are, in fact, from the perspective of morphology, the same morpheme, manifested in different graphical and phonetical forms, but playing the same morphological role of producing the idea of opposition. So they are allomorphs. They are not the same, but they are similar, analogous forms. They are similar forms that will produce the same effect in the words that they are associated with. Okay? Is that comprehensible or incomprehensible?
It is comprehensible, Professor.
Good. So let's see another example of allomorphs. Hunt, band, and fished. Take a look at the phonetical transcriptions. Hunt, band, ud, d. I'm exaggerating, okay? And fished with this final t, yeah? Or even if you prefer worked with the final kt, like a K and T, worked. All of these words end in a final ed. Assuming that all these verbs are in the simple past, assuming that all of these verbs are in the simple past, what we have here is a set of different possible phonetic realizations. The graphic manifestation is ed for all of them, okay? You could say, teacher, the spelling is the same. Of course, they are the same morpheme because the spelling is the same. It's a final ed, yes, but when you go to pronunciation, the phonetic realization is kind of different. I could even put here the worked, the fourth one. So, but if you assume all of these verbs are in simple past, they are allomorphs. They are different phonetic realizations for the same simple past morpheme. The simple past morpheme for regular verbs, as you all are familiar with, is a final ed. But we can make things a bit more problematic. Let's assume this hunted is applied in a sentence like, just a moment. Uh, let's put this into context. Uh, John years uh, last season. Okay. Now let's get another context. Let's take the band. Okay. He was banned from the Chamber of Representatives. Let's get this other final ED with a different color. Now look at these two sentences, at these two examples. Look at the final ED in hunted. What verb tense is this? John hunted deers. Last season, and he was banned from the Chamber of Representatives. Do you think the final ED here is the same final ED here, grammatically speaking?
It is not.
It is not, because here I have simple past.
Yes.
And here, what verb tense do I have?
It is the past participle.
It's the past participle used in passive voice, to be banned. Okay? So can I say the ED in red is the same ED in blue? Or it happens to be a coincidence?
Well, it is the same, but it isn't.
Yeah, this is the answer. It is the same, but it is not. It will depend on what perspective, which perspective you would like to assume. If you are assuming the perspective of orthography, they are the same, but we are speaking from the perspective of morphosyntax, of morphology. Are they the same morpheme? They are not, okay? Why not? Because this final morpheme ed in hunted is what I call the past, the simple past morpheme. This final ed in band is what I call the past participle morpheme. They happen to graphically and phonetically be the same, but the function they play, the role they play in the process of word formation is completely different. And what gives us this idea of difference is an irregular verb like break, which we have three forms: break, broke, broken. This band here is more, it's closest in meaning to broken than to broke. Now, this hunted here is closest in meaning to broke than to broken. This is participle. This is simple past. Oh, teacher, but they are final ED. Yes. So they happen to have the same graphic representation, the same sound. That's why they are same. In Greek, we say homo. Sound on. Okay. They have the same sound, but not, they are not similar forms. Okay. They are not similar forms because this form here is participle and this form here is simple past. So when I have a coincidence in sound and spelling, I have homophones. When I have different spellings or different sound production for the same morphological word formation process, then I have allomorphs. Let's take a look. So you see this band here. Let's change. Let's use another process for forming a sentence with band. Okay. Let's put it into the active voice. The chamber and him. Is it still past participle?
No.
No, now it's simple past. And now, how do I pronounce this? Uh, hunt, hunt, with a final D. Band, okay? In fact, this is with a schwa, like this. Let's go back to the slide. Hunt with schwa and band with a D. So, do I have a difference in phonetics? Hunt, band.
Yes.
It's a slight difference, but we do, right? Hunted. I'm going to exaggerate. Hunted, band. Okay. If you put the woman from Google to speak it, you will notice the difference better than with my reproduction. Phonetically, they are slightly different. Graphically, they are the same. But this is not my point of interest when I'm talking from the perspective of morphology. I want to know if they have the same function when associated to a word. Do they? Both of them produce simple past. So it does not matter for me. Sorry. It does not matter for me. Let me copy these morphemes and take to the word processor. If this is pronounced like this, and this one is pronounced like this. You see the red phoneme or the blue phoneme. Phonemes are different for sure. And phonetically, they are different. But morphologically, they are the same. They produce the same verb tense. They have the same function of inflecting a verb from the infinitive, from its natural form, into simple past. So my question is this the same phoneme? Same sound? Yes or no?
No.
No. Is this the same form?
Yes.
Yes. So when sound, although sound is different, we can even explore this. Same spelling.
Yes.
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 Oops. But when I'm talking about allomorphs, these two answers here are not that relevant. What matters for me is if this answer is yes. If I have the same form, the same, and when I mean the same form, the same morphological function, if the answer is yes, although spelling is different, although the sound is different, no matter what I have here, it's an allomorph. Is it clear now?
Yes.
Go back to the slides. So let's take the plural. We discussed this last class. Let's consider, we know the plural as either S, a final ES, okay? Sometimes for knife, wife, and so on, a final VES. But there is the zero plural. Let's discuss it. Uh, the plural can be attached to a number of lexical morphemes to produce structures like cat plus plural. Cat plus plural, the famous cats with a final S. Yeah. Or let's talk about phonemes instead with a final S. Yeah. Bus. How do you produce the plural of bus? In the same way you produce the plural of cats, of cat. Bus has its own rules for forming the plural. It needs an ES, buses. Okay. Now, what's the plural for sheep? One sheep, two.
Uh, sheep.
One sheep, two sheep. And now, what do I do with this morpheme that I can't see, but I know it's there from context? There are some words that we only know they are in the plural from context, from sentence. Okay. Uh, my son bought two sheep. Okay, so this is plural. And the plural for man. What's the plural for man? Just a
Man.
changing vowel. Man with an E. A changing vowel, a slight change in pronunciation. Okay, so in each of these examples, the actual forms of the morphs that result from the morpheme plural are different. They do not follow the rule of adding an S, but they are all allomorphs. Bus, buses, cat, cats, sheep, sheep, man, man. They are all allomorphs. The plurals are all allomorphs among themselves of the morpheme they get attached with. Okay, so in addition to a final s or us, another allomorph of plural in English seems to be a zero morpheme because the plural of sheep is actually sheep plus zero. When we look at man, we have a vowel change in the word as the morpheme that produces the irregular plural form man. Okay, this is George Yule. This is not a consensus, but George Yule has created this model, this theory of considering these irregular plurals a zero morpheme. It's like it's not there, but it's implicit. Okay, so let's call it the zero morpheme. Can you think of other words that have a zero morpheme for plural?
Advice?
Advice. In fact, advice. Because when you want to count it, you say a piece of advice. Yeah. Advice is uncount. So it should be count. I guess
Oh.
shrimp. Shrimp, isn't it? What?
Mm-hmm.
Shrimp or fish. Okay. And so on. So because the notion of having a plural If a noun to have a plural should be count. Yeah, should be countable. Well,
I was actually about to ask if sheep and advice were in fact allomorphs according to George Hill, but the answer is no, right? Because one of them is not countable and the other one is countable, is it?
yeah, because sheep you can count sheep. Yeah, advice you cannot. That's the idea.
Okay.
Uh, from according to English definitions to the dictionary, advice is uncount. Okay, now you can count pieces of advice. I'll give you a piece of advice. Don't do that. Okay, so we use this expression before a piece of. Okay, that's what determines that the word is uncount. So let's see more examples of allomorphs. Take the case of electric, usually with this final k, but it has a final s in electricity. So you see that the morpheme changes to receive a suffix, okay? But the final k and s, they are allomorphs, okay? Electric, electricity. There's a change so that the suffix can be attached to the word. The morpheme electric has two allomorphs then, electric and electris. You see? Although the phonetic realization is different, the final k and the final s, they are part of the same, they are the same morpheme, okay? So the second occurs only when the suffix et is attached to the word to make it fit, okay? To make sounds fit. So words such as life, shelf, and leaf have a final f in most forms. But when they are pluralized, the base has a final v, like in lives, shelves, and leaves. Thus, these words have two allomorphs. These morphemes, these base morphemes, okay, because life, shelf, and leave, okay, they are words and morphemes because they have only one morpheme. They all have two allomorphs. One for the singular form, life, lives. So there's a change here, okay? Shelf, shelves when I want to make the plural. So there's a change here. So all these roots here, they have two different graphic and phonetic manifestations. We say that they have two allomorphs. Is it clear what allomorphs are now? Let me try to draw a board here, a theoretical board for allomorphs. Tabela. Okay. So let's do it this way. Allomorphs versus homophones. Sound slash spelling. I'll put it into this column. Function. So if in allomorphs to allomorphs, sound and spelling can be different. Function, same. In homophones, the sound is the same. Sometimes the sound and the spelling, sometimes just the sound, sometimes just the spelling. They are the same, but the function is different. Let me erase this. Okay. So keep this in mind. Okay. I think this is a better way to memorize. Okay. Oops. Is it clear for you? And when I mean function, of course, I mean morphological logical function. If it transforms the word into an adverb, if it will put the word in the plural, if it's used to give the idea of third person singular, this is all what we call function. Did I disappear from camera? Hello?
I'm sorry, can you
I
come again?
disappeared here from the camera. Just a moment.
Yes. Hmm.
Just a moment, okay? Okay, I guess I have a heating issue with the cell phone that was being used as a camera. Give me just some moments without looking at my face. It will come back. It will recover. Look at the slides, which are more important. So we were discussing the chart. Yeah. So when I mean morphological function, I mean this normally a grammatical function, producing plural, producing adverb, or uh, working for verb conjugation, concordance, agreement. Okay, that's right. Do you understand when I mean morphological function? Now, sound spelling. Yeah, I think it's okay for
Yes.
you. So keep this rule of thumb here. Okay, keep keep this in mind. Okay, what is an allomorph and what is a homophone. Now, let's see a bit more about the morphemes. We'll go back to allomorphs and homophones in practice, okay? In a few moments, okay? And we are going to discuss them as we deal with them to classify. So, the form of a morpheme is based on its function. Spelling is irrelevant. Remember, I told you in the chart, spelling is not relevant to define if a morpheme with a different phonetical realization and a different spelling is an allomorph or not. What is relevant is the role it plays in the process of word formation. Homophones, on the other hand, I have already explained because I explained them in contrast to each other. Homophones are different morphemes that have the same phonological form. You see, they are just the opposite. They are two morphemes with a coincidence in phonetics, in phonological forms. Okay, like rabbits, the final S for plural morpheme, and Rodriguez's car, the final S for genitive case. This S is not this S, but the sound is S. Or drives. She drives very well. This other S has the same phonetic realization, but is the third person singular morpheme. You see? So in this case here, what I have is just a coincidence in sound, but they are homophones. This is plural, this is genitive, this is third person singular. They have nothing to do, morphologically speaking, to each other. They have everything to do, phonetically speaking, to each other. Morphologically speaking, they are completely different guys. Okay? Is it clear now the difference between allomorphs and homophones?
Yes.
Or a
Yes.
bit more clear at least? Okay, let me just try to find the software I use for camera here. I think it's going to be possible now to use it. Did I get back to the screen? Let me see. No?
Camera? No.
Just the cat. I use an old phone. Yes, let it be. Let it be. I use an old phone as a camera because my webcam is not that good. Okay. So let's talk a little bit more on homophones. Take a look at sail and sail. What is the difference in pronunciation? Is there one?
No.
No. But are they the same morpheme? Do they mean the same thing? Of course not. They are what we call they are pronunciation pairs. Yeah, they have exactly the same pronunciation, but with completely different meanings, completely different processes of formation. Sail, as in the first case here, is a noun. The second one is a verb. So this one can have a plural. This one, when I say sails, I mean third person singular. He sails the ocean and so on. Okay, so it's completely different. Or read, put in the past, that we pronounce red, and the color red. Another case of homophones, okay? In this case, with different spellings, okay? Two, two, and two. They are also homophones, the same sound, but different morphemes, different words, different meanings, nothing to do with each other from the morphology perspective. Now, let's take this from Saussure. Saussure says that in all languages, discrete linguistic units combine rule-governed ways to form larger units. So the minimal unit in the science named morphology is the, you should know this by heart. What is the minimal unit for morphology? The minimal unit in chemistry supposedly is the atom. Now people have been discovering particles, but every science has its minimal unit of study. The minimal unit of study in morphology is the morpheme.
Morpheme.
Okay, now morphemes get together. Morphemes get associated to each other, just like atoms get together to form molecules. I don't know how to pronounce that. Uh, Morphemes get together to pronounce larger units. This is what Saussure says when he is theorizing about linguistics. And he says that linguistic units get together to form more complex units. In the case of morphemes, they get combined to form some units that we are going to see their names now. So starting from phonetics, the sounds unite and combine to form morphemes. Everybody agrees that a morpheme is a combination of sounds. So morphology is a science that deals with a larger unit of meaning than phonetics. Phonetics can split a morpheme into two parts. Okay, for us in morphology, the morpheme is not divisible. Morphemes combine to form words and sometimes to form more basic units that we call stems. Okay, words will combine to form phrases, and this is from the perspective of syntax. Okay, syntax will deal with the phrase as phrases combine to form sentences and so on, and then you have the text, yeah, for discourse analysis. So what is the relationship between morphemes and words? Maybe uh, we don't know what morphemes are, but we know what morphemes are not. In linguistics, every unit is what all the other units are not. If you ask me, define a verb, oh, a verb is not a noun. It's not an adverb either. It's not, you see, it's not an article either. So humans can understand words that have never been heard before. Why do you think it happens? I'll tell you an anecdote, which you were not born, but there was a discussion when Fernando Collor was the president if he was going to fire one of his ministers, and people questioned him about this minister of labor, and he said, o magre é imexível. Essa palavra existe no dicionário da língua portuguesa? Imexível. Alguém
Não.
é imexível? Mas o que
Não,
significa imexível? Vocês conseguem tirar um significado disso?
não se pode mexer.
Alguém que não se pode mexer. Por que a gente consegue dar esse sentido? Não está no dicionário. A gente aprendeu isso como não gramatical. Qual é a explicação disso?
Eu acho que por causa do radical, né? A gente já tem a ideia de mexer. E o prefixo in, aí a gente já pensa que não pode.
Ou seja, você não precisa estudar morfossintaxe na universidade para saber que há prefixos que cumprem uma certa função de negação. E que se você reconhece o radical e o prefixo está antes dele, mesmo que a palavra não seja dicionarizada, você consegue atribuir um sentido a ela. O nome disso é neologismo, né? Quando isso se torna, claro, aceitado na comunidade, embora não dicionarizado, ele se torna um neologismo. Quando ainda não é um neologismo, a gente diz só que é não gramatical, né? A gente põe aquele asterisco, faz a anotação de ungrammatical. Okay, so we understand these words because there are rules that govern the process of word formation. If you go to generative grammar from Chomsky and his theory on the way children speak, you will notice that there is a rule that children obey. Children are not aware of the exceptions. They learn the rule and they apply the rule. Sometimes they make funny mistakes, but what they speak is understandable exactly because they get appropriated of these rules. So we can also create new words according to our needs. As our world changes, we need vocabulary to describe it, isn't it? Can you give me examples of words that have been created recently? I'll try to put the camera back. Think of examples of words that have been recently created.
Meme, maybe.
Which word? Sorry.
Meme.
Can you type it?
Yes,
Meme.
that one.
Yes, meme. Yes, in fact, meme is a word that was resignified, but it's in the language before, like memetics. In fact, it's an abbreviation. Yeah. Memetics.
Oh, I see. I didn't know that.
From mimesis, yeah? From de mimese, né? Mimese, perdão. But yes, it's a process of word creation because when you cut down, it's also creation. Others, can you think of?
Eu tenho uma pergunta.
Sorry?
Tem uma pergunta.
Pode fazer.
Quando a gente, aqui, por exemplo, na língua portuguesa, quando a gente adota uma palavra estrangeira, por exemplo, da língua inglesa, e ressignifica essa palavra, pode ser considerado um neologismo?
Um neologismo não, aí seria um anglicismo, né? Seria um anglicismo, um estrangeirismo que a gente fala. Quando essa palavra é dicionarizada, geralmente ela sofre adaptações ortográficas, adaptações fonéticas para caber nas regras do português, né? Embora a palavra mouse, por exemplo, né, usada na informática, não sofreu qualquer alteração no português. Ninguém escreve mouse M-A-U-S-E ou M-A-U-Z-E. Escreve como no inglês, pronuncia como no inglês, mas é um anglicismo. É um anglicismo. Em países como Portugal, essa palavra não é utilizada, né? Aí você tem a questão da diferença cultural, um pouco de questão de nacionalismo linguístico, né? Que o brasileiro. Eu evito esse estereótipo de que o brasileiro é mais relaxado com o português, de que o português é mais zeloso com o seu idioma, mas são atitudes diferentes diante dos estrangeirismos, né? Mas aí a gente chamaria de anglicismo, não é bem um neologismo. O neologismo é quando eu uso as regras da língua, especialmente as de prefixação, sufixação, conjugação verbal, para produzir palavras que até então não existiam, né? Por exemplo, chipar alguém, né? Já viram esse termo? Chipar?
Sim.
Sim. Sextar também?
Sextou, isso, sextou, né? Você pega o sexta, que é um substantivo, né, de sexta-feira, e transforma ele em verbo, a partir da terminação ou, que dá a ideia de pretérito. Percebem o que é um neologismo? É essa possibilidade criativa que a língua tem, tá? Então, o ou aí, ele é o quê? Ele é um morfema, né? Ele é um morfema de derivação verbal. Ele deriva um substantivo em verbo. A gente vai ver muito isso no inglês. O ing, que a gente está acostumado com ele como progressive, né? Para os tempos contínuos, present continuous, future continuous, ele também pode ser um morfema de derivação adjetiva. Ele transforma uma palavra que é um verbo em substantivo ou em adjetivo, por exemplo, teach, né? The process of teaching, the teaching process. Teaching pode ser o contínuo do verbo to teach, he is teaching English now, ou his teaching is really interesting. I mean, his ability to teach, his process of teaching. Então, esse ing ele é bem versátil. E no caso do teaching, contínuo, tempo contínuo, he is teaching, e his teaching is nice, eu tenho um caso de homofonia, porque o ing de um fonologicamente é idêntico ao outro, mas morfossintaticamente cumpre funções diferentes. Um é usado para conjugar um verbo num tempo progressivo e o outro é usado para transformar esse verbo num substantivo. Tá? Deixa eu tentar voltar a câmera aqui. Eu já estou aperreado. E por enquanto não, mas mais tarde eu vou precisar. Okay, I think now it's going to work. Just a moment. Do you see anything here? Let me see. Yes, now you see my office. Hello, I'm back. Sorry about that. So, is it understood uh, the idea of this creative possibility and this understanding of new words is only possible because there are rules. It's not a random process of word formation. Okay, the process of word formation has rules, and who is the science that studies these rules is morphology. I'll take a case here, for example, unrewritable. This word would not be imaginable until we had the technology of unrewritable CDs. Camera off again. I don't know what's happening. Yes, this cell phone has a kind of problem. So let's finish the class without my camera, okay? And then I fix it for the next class. So unrewritable. When we had the technology, now it does not belong to your reality anymore because we don't even use CDs anymore. But we had writable CDs, which were considered to be impossible, but writable, okay, because we used to write on paper, so the paper is writable. The word existed before. Rewritable is a new word from the technological era of recording CDs. So you could erase and write again. Now, unrewritable were those that you could erase, write again, delete, write again, delete, and write again. Okay? These two words, the last two words, did not exist until the technology came up. So, as technology evolves, we create terms, we create words to describe what they do. Okay? And this is the creative process of language. And to create these words, we rely on morphological rules. So let's see the types of morphemes, okay? Uh, it's not enough to know that there are allomorphs, okay, and that morphemes are different in form, but they play the same role. There are different types of morpheme, each one with different functions, okay? Some of them, for example, are the principal morpheme of a word. We call it the root. Others are there just to fulfill grammatical rules, like the he plays the piano. This final S is not as important as the first morpheme play. The morpheme s is there just to give the idea of third person singular. Okay. So first of all, we have two big categories: the bound morphemes and the free morphemes. Okay. Now, we are going to discuss these two morphemes in detail next class, but basically, bound morphemes do not have a meaning on their own. And free morphemes can stand alone as words. For example, do you understand if I say Lee? What is the meaning of Lee? Take the word happily or fortunately. Take the case of fortunately. Sorry. Let me go to the board. Do you understand this word, fortune?
Yes.
Yes.
Do you understand the word fortunate?
Yes.
Does it remind you of any meaning? Fortune. Although there was a change, there was an E here that was dropped, but do you understand this alone? Fortune.
Uh, I can associate with other words that I know.
Yeah, fortune, fortunately, fortunate, fortune, like this. Yeah, okay, it's possible to know, to associate. But do you understand eight on its own? Just
In
this.
a in another context, yes.
In another context, as the past of to eat. Yeah.
Yes.
But this is the case of homophony. Okay.
Mm-hmm.
But this final eight, I mean, eight is a suffix. We will represent this with a dash before. This eight is impossible to understand on its own. This the same eight as in graduate or in uh, celebrate. So you understand celeb, but you do not understand eight. This eight, I call it a bound morpheme, while this celeb, fortune, and all the other examples I gave before the roots, you understand them as free morphemes. Well, if you are free, you can do whatever you wish. You do not need anyone to fulfill your meaning. You are conscious of yourself. Okay? Take the song of the Rolling Stones. I'm free to do what I want. Okay? These morphemes are free to mean what they mean. They do not need extra parts to have a meaning associated with them, as in celebrate, fortunate, or congregate, and so on. But the eight, what is the meaning of eight? It needs to be attached to a word so that we know, okay, this is a suffix that is used to form verbs. Okay, so this final eight is a suffix. And what is its meaning? I don't know. I don't know what eight means. Of course, there is the homophone eight, which is the past tense of to eat, but it's not the case. Okay, this final eight as a suffix does not mean anything. So we call it bound morpheme because it needs to be attached to some other morpheme to produce meaning. So when I say free morpheme, I mean this morpheme is potentially a root morpheme. And a bound morpheme is potentially a prefix or a suffix. Either a prefix or a suffix. It needs to be attached to another morpheme to have some kind of meaning. Do you understand the difference between bound and free? Bound morphemes, they need, I'll go back to this next class, okay? Bound morphemes need to be attached. They do not have a meaning on their own. Free morphemes, you can even find some of them in the dictionary as words. Basically, free morphemes can stand alone as words. Bound morphemes cannot, okay? So these are the two types of morphemes, that one of the ways that we can classify morphemes into two big categories. And of course, free morphemes are also named root morphemes. They can be the root of words. And from these roots, other words will derive with the adding of prefixes and suffixes. There are also the stem morphemes. When a prefix or a suffix or another root gets together to a root to form a stem. Okay, for example, uh, distortion. Okay, I have the final yan, which is a morpheme. This, which is a prefix, and tort. Okay, what does tort mean? In English, I mean, with an English root, with an English origin, an Anglo-Saxon origin, you cannot find a word like this. But in Latin, what this root means for you? Tort. Torto, né? O que é distorcer uma coisa? Entortar, né? Ou contortion. You see? Eu tenho 3 morfemas aqui. Distortion. This one means on its own. It's the root, okay? But this and yon are bound morphemes, okay? Now, when I take this word distortion, se eu eliminar isso aqui, if I drop the final yon, I still have the verb to distort, which is what I call a stem. Pensa na árvore. O que é o stem? You have the roots and you have the stems. What is a stem? Let's go to Google Images. No, not stem. 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 You see? The roots. Try to apply it to morphology, to the ideas you are learning. Se eu tenho o root e eu tenho o stem, quem é a unidade maior? Root ou stem? Stem é morpheme plus morpheme, okay? Forming a more complex unit. Normally a root plus a prefix or a root plus a suffix, okay? So we have the stem. When I associate a root morpheme with a prefix, a suffix, or even another root in case of compound words like the White House. White House, I have 2 roots. White is a root, it means on its own. House is another root, it means on its own. But when they get together, I have a process of composition. And then I have the proper name White House, which has a more complex meaning and a more complex structure. A stem is root plus another morpheme, okay? Morphemes can be either derivational, because they derive word classes into others. For example, they derive verbs into adjectives, they derive nouns into adjectives, or they derive verbs into adverbs, or they can be inflectional. And when I mean inflectional, I mean verb agreement, number agreement, gender, and so on. Okay. Normally, inflectional morphemes are more related to grammar rules. For example, an example of inflection: teach, teaching. He's teaching, morphosyntax now. This ing for progressive is an inflectional morpheme because it operates in the verb to give an idea of verb tense. The final ed, either for simple past or for past participle, all of these morphemes at the end, normally suffixes, they are inflectional suffixes. They produce agreement, they produce verb tense, okay? Now, derivational morphemes will produce normally new words with a related but different meaning, okay? Don't worry, because I'm just presenting you what's to come, okay? We are going to discuss each of these types of morphemes one by one. We also have the affixes. Okay, we can call them affixes, prefixes, and suffixes, which can be grammatical morphemes as the inflectional ones, or lexical morphemes, okay? Or if you prefer, you can classify them as content morphemes, like the root morphemes, because they express an idea, they are related to the idea of noun, they express something in the world, and function morphemes when they are there just to fulfill grammatical rules. So if you consider the types of morphemes, we have this scheme here. We have the group of morphemes, okay? Now morphemes can be either lexical or grammatical. Follow this scheme here. Morphemes can be either lexical, I mean, naming something in the world, or grammatical, being there in the word just to give agreement, number, verb tense, and so on. Lexical morphemes can mean on their own, can stand alone as words, so we call them free lexical morphemes, or they can be bound, okay? They need to be attached to another morpheme to have a meaning, so they are bound lexical morphemes. The same happens to grammatical morphemes. They can be free and mean on their own, like a verb, for example, or they can be bound. They need to be attached, okay, to other morphemes, and so on. The case of free lexical morphemes, nouns, verbs, and adjectives. Here, compress, depress, oppress, repress, and suppress, they are all free lexical morphemes in press, press, happening here all the time, okay? I don't know if you can make a difference, but press is in italics. So I'm talking about the morpheme in italics, press, okay? It's a noun, sorry, it's a verb, it's free, it's lexical, because press describes an action, and it's a morpheme. Now, when I change the prefix, con, de, op, re, or sup, I change slightly its meaning, okay? Com, de, op, re, and sup are bound morphemes. Take the case here of bound morphemes. Subvert, invert, and convert, okay? So these morphemes sub, in, and con, they need to be attached to vert to have a meaning. They are bound because they do not mean on their own. However, they are lexical because they give the idea of under or of by the side, okay, change, and so on. They are lexical morphemes. So this is the scheme of all the morphemes we are going to study along the morphology part of this course, okay? Too much for your minds? Hello, are you there?
Yes, I am. It's not too
Alive?
much. I have to study by my own.
We all have to. Me too. Okay, because we forget it. It's, you know, it's not like something that you should have just a sensibility for. It's way too technical. Okay, but it's not difficult. It's hardworking, let's say. Okay, it demands you a bit of hard working. So next class we are going to I'm going to prepare some exercises for you to recognize homophones and allomorphs. I think I'm back now. Yes, I'm back.
Uh,
Yes, let me go back here. Stop presenting. So next class, we are going to do some exercises on recognizing homophones and allomorphs, and also recognizing bound and free morphemes. We are going to go inside the subject of bound and free morphemes. It's easy. It's not difficult. It's a matter of practice. I'll prepare some practice for you. Okay? For now, I think this subject is done for today. If you have any question, we have 10 minutes. Would you like to ask any question? Something that wasn't clear in my explanation?
I'm fine.
Okay. Yes, if you have any problems, watch the video again. Okay. Uh, Keep that chart that I put there in mind. Okay, that chart is really important for you to understand the difference between allomorphs and homophones. But remember, homophones, when you think of phones, you say phonetics. You think of phonetics. It has nothing to do with our studies here. Our studies here are more concentrated in allomorphs. Allo, similar, morph, morpheme. The morphemes that are similar, although spelling is different. Okay, I'll prepare a list of exercises so that you can fix these concepts. Okay, for today, I think that's enough.
Okay, Professor.
Okay, I'll be the last one to leave. If you have any question, I'm still here. I'll stop the recording now, but I'll still be here. I have to take a print screen. Sorry. It's the attendance. All right, the attendance is done. You can leave now.
Professor, I have one
Yes.
question here. Is it okay if we turn our cameras off, or do you want us to turn the cameras on for the next class?
Well, it's not mandatory. I really appreciate when you turn the cameras on because I don't feel that alone. Uh,
Okay.
Sometimes it's hard to be speaking to the walls, but I will not punish you if you don't. Okay.
Okay. I was wondering because I don't have like my devices ready for cameras, but
Okay.
I can turn that on next Tuesday if that's okay.
Okay. I normally turn mine on because I think for you it's important to know who your professor is, what face he has. But we had a problem with my camera today, and class worked fine. But it's good for me to know who my students are. Maybe when we meet again, when this pandemic is over, is finally over, and we are all vaccinated, I hope we can have a coffee in the
Mhm.
coffee shop, and we know each other not only by name, but we know each other from face. You know, we know your faces to
O-
recognize. I don't know what
Okay.
faces my student have. There are students that I only know the name. Okay, but anyway, it's up to you. Okay, it's up to you guys.
All right. Okay.
Okay, have a nice morning.
You too. Bye bye.
Bye.
Bye, teacher.
Goodbye.